My name is Alyssa Grant, and I never thought a paycheck would end up defining my dignity. At 26, I was just another face in the crowd of downtown Los Angeles, juggling student loans, rent, and a hope that hard work actually meant something. My morning started before the sun was even thinking of rising. I'd grab a burnt piece of toast, shove it in my mouth, and sprint 3 blocks to catch the 6:45 a.m. metro. By the time I reached the lobby of Winter and Pace Creative Agency, I'd already rehearsed every client's name I had to call, every file I had to organize, and every smile I had to fake. I wasn't a graphic designer. I wasn't in marketing. I was the assistant to the assistant of the operations director. Basically, I did everything no one else wanted to do. Paperwork? Mine. Coffee runs? Definitely mine. Tech issues? Somehow mine. I didn't complain, though. Not out loud. Because I believed if I worked hard enough, someone would notice. That someone would say, "Alyssa, how about we promote you?" But promotions don't come when you're invisible. I lived in a tiny one-bedroom apartment in East Hollywood with my best friend Jade, a nurse who worked the night shift. She was my anchor. Every time I came home too tired to even speak, she'd slide over leftover pad thai and say, "You're worth more than how they treat you." I'd laugh it off. It's just temporary. But temporary started to look permanent. The first red flag came on a Wednesday. It was payday, and I always received my direct deposit around noon. That day, nothing came through. I stared at my banking app for hours, refreshing like it owed me an explanation. I walked down the hall to Mr. Roberts' office. He was the HR director, an older man who always smelled like peppermint and paperwork. I knocked lightly. He looked up. "Yes, Alyssa? I just noticed I haven't been paid yet," I said carefully. "Maybe it's a banking delay?" He blinked, clearly caught off guard. "Oh, that right. There's been a small hiccup in processing, but it should be resolved by tomorrow." Nothing to worry about. Except tomorrow came. And nothing changed. The next day, I approached Karen Winter, the co-founder. Blonde bob, Prada glasses, and a stare that could freeze fire. She waved me off mid-sentence. "I'm in meetings all day. Send an email." I did. No reply. Then came the second missed paycheck. That weekend, I sat at the kitchen counter. My bills spread out like accusations. Jade leaned against the fridge, arms crossed. "That's illegal, you know." I shook my head. "It's probably a technical issue. I just need to talk to the right person." "Alyssa, they're gaslighting you. You can't keep giving them the benefit of the doubt." But I wasn't ready to believe my company would actually rob me. I remembered when I first got hired. They praised my work ethic, my go-getter attitude. They called me a fresh breath of millennial energy. I was naive enough to think that meant something. 2 weeks passed. Then 3. I kept working, afraid to stop, afraid to get fired, even more afraid to confront someone who could crush my career with one email. Then came the moment that changed everything. It was a Monday morning. I'd stayed late the night before organizing files for a major pitch meeting. I hadn't slept. As I walked in with 2 trays of Starbucks for the execs, I heard my name being whispered. "Still showing up like a little unpaid intern," someone said. I froze. The voice came from Melissa, one of the junior associates. She was talking to Tyler, the CFO's nephew, fresh out of college and already earning triple my salary. They didn't even flinch when I walked past. Something inside me cracked. That evening, I stayed behind. The office was dimly lit, the cleaning crew humming somewhere in the background. I logged into the shared server, something I wasn't supposed to do, and looked for my payment history. Files. Payroll records. Employee contracts. That's when I found it. A folder named Non-Essential Contracts, Internal Holds. My name was in there, along with 4 others. All entry-level. All women. A note in the corner read, "Hold payments Q1, discretionary delay approved." Discretionary delay? What did that even mean? I printed everything. My heart was racing. I knew I was crossing a line, but they had already crossed one first. I tucked the pages into my bag, left the building, and didn't look back. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept staring at the documents, the spreadsheet, the internal notes. I thought about the rent due in 5 days. My student loan reminder flashing in my inbox. The $23 left in my checking account. I knew I couldn't ignore it anymore. Something bigger was happening, and I had just seen the first shadow of it. The next morning, I walked into the office, heart thudding so hard I could hear it in my ears. Everything felt different. The walls looked grayer. The air tasted stale. The fake smiles from the marketing team felt even faker. I couldn't unsee the documents from the night before. That folder had confirmed what I'd feared deep down. They were withholding pay intentionally. And not just from me. I wasn't alone. I scanned the other names listed. Maria Fenton, Imani Delgado, Heather Liu, and Olivia Benson. All junior-level employees. All women. I'd seen their tired faces, their strained laughter in the break room. Suddenly, it all made sense. Their whispering, their tension, their long hours for nothing. I decided to test the waters. During lunch, I caught Maria by the elevator. "Hey," I said casually, "ever notice anything weird with payroll?" She hesitated. "You mean delays?" I nodded slowly. Maria looked around before replying. "Yes. 2 pay cycles. They keep saying they're fixing it." My stomach sank. It was happening to her too. "What are you going to do?" I asked. She shrugged, biting her lip. "What can I do? I don't want to get blacklisted in the industry." That was the fear. The unspoken threat. If you spoke up, your career ended before it even began. And for women like us, young, new, replaceable, that was all it took. That evening I called Jade. "I think I need to talk to a lawyer."
"Finally," she said.
"I'll send you my cousin's contact. She used to work for a labor law firm." The next day, I met Danielle Myers, a sharp-eyed attorney with a no-nonsense attitude and a legal pad that had seen some wars. I explained everything, my missing paychecks, the folder I found, the list of names. Danielle listened without interrupting. When I finished, she leaned back and said, "They're violating California labor laws. Wage theft is serious. You have every right to file a claim." "Won't I get fired?" "Maybe," she said honestly. "But if you build the case carefully and document everything, you can protect yourself. Also, retaliation is illegal too. If they fire you for reporting them, that's another lawsuit." I blinked. It was terrifying, but also oddly empowering. Danielle gave me homework. Gather emails, timesheets, direct deposit records, screenshots. Anything that proves your hours and the missed pay. If you can get the other girls to speak up too, we can build a stronger case. Back at the office, things got colder. I wasn't sure if someone knew I had snooped into the server, but Mr. Roberts started giving me strange looks. I was excluded from meetings. Tasks I used to handle were handed off to interns. My keycard stopped working after 6 p.m. The message was clear, "We know. Stay in line." But I wasn't backing down. I pulled together every document I could find. Every time card. Every confirmation email. Every unpaid invoice. I created a hidden folder in my Google Drive labeled Family Recipes, just in case. One day after work, I texted Maria, Olivia, and Imani to meet me at a nearby cafe. They showed up reluctantly, eyes darting, nervous. "I know you haven't been paid," I said, laying it all out. "And I know you're scared, but we have rights. I've already spoken to a lawyer. We can do something about this." Silence. Maria shifted uncomfortably. Olivia bit her straw. Imani looked straight at me.
"I've got a kid," she said.
"I need that paycheck more than I need revenge." "This isn't revenge," I said quietly. "This is justice. And if we don't speak up, they'll keep doing it to other women. Younger ones. Ones who won't even ask questions." That struck something. By the end of the night, Maria and Imani agreed to talk to Danielle. Olivia didn't say yes, but she didn't say no either. Over the next week, I became obsessed. I tracked every small discrepancy in our work systems. Found out that the CFO, Eric Pace, had quietly funneled funds out of operations and into a projected Q2 bonus pool. Translation? They weren't broke. They were shifting money around to reward themselves while leaving us in the dust. I printed that too. Danielle's voice was steady when I handed her everything. This is more than enough to file a wage claim with the California Labor Commissioner, and possibly a class action suit if the others commit. That night, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Control. But control is dangerous when you've been taught to stay quiet. 2 days later, I was called into Karen Winter's office. Alone. She was seated at her glass desk, staring at me like I'd spilled coffee on her Chanel. "Close the door," she said, smiling, but the kind of smile a lion gives before it bites. I sat down, heart hammering. "We've noticed some behavior from you lately that raises concerns." "Such as?" I asked, voice level. "Accessing unauthorized files. Speaking to employees about confidential matters. Causing unrest." I was just asking questions. She leaned forward. "You don't want to make this harder for yourself, Alyssa. You're a smart girl. Be smart about this." I stared at her. "Are you threatening me?" "Not at all. Just offering some guidance." I stood up. "Thanks for the guidance. I'll take it to court." For a flicker of a second, the smile dropped. I walked out before she could say another word. The war had officially begun. The moment I stepped out of Karen Winter's office, everything changed. The air around me felt charged, like static right before a storm. I wasn't scared anymore. I was furious. By the time I reached my desk, an official HR warning had already landed in my inbox. Disruptive conduct. Breach of internal protocol. Misuse of data. They were trying to paint me as the problem. I forwarded the email to Danielle, my attorney. Her reply came just 5 minutes later. "They're bluffing. They're panicking. Do not respond. Document everything." From that point on, I moved like someone preparing for battle. I started recording every interaction, whether it was a whispered hallway threat, a passive-aggressive comment from a manager, or a sudden change in duties. I kept a notebook in my purse and wrote down the date, time, exact wording, and who said what. I even bought a cheap backup phone and started audio recording staff meetings just in case. Danielle said California was a 2-party consent state, so I had to be careful, but I made sure nothing crossed the line. Everything I gathered was either digital or written, and all of it painted a clear picture. They were retaliating.
Hard.
Meanwhile, things were escalating outside the office, too. Maria had joined the legal case officially. Imani was on the edge, worried she'd be fired before her son's school tuition was due. Olivia ghosted us completely. I didn't blame her. Fear makes people disappear. Danielle filed the first formal complaint with the California Labor Commissioner under the Wage Theft Protection Act. The agency would launch an investigation. She also filed an internal letter to Winter and Pace informing them of pending legal action. That letter hit them like a grenade. Suddenly, I was called into another HR meeting, but this time with Eric Pace, the CFO, present. "Let's talk about resolving this like adults," he said smoothly. I stared at him. "Like adults? You mean the kind who steal wages and gaslight employees?" He raised his hands. "Let's not get dramatic."
"What do you want, Alyssa?"
What did I want? I want my unpaid wages. I want compensation for retaliation. And I want you to stop doing this to anyone else. Ever again. Eric chuckled softly, leaning back in his chair. "Or you could walk away quietly. We'd be willing to write a recommendation letter. Even offer a small bonus to help you move on." There it was.
A bribe.
My jaw clenched. "I'm not for sale." As I stood to leave, he said, "You really think a judge is going to believe a disgruntled assistant over a reputable firm?" I turned to face him. "Try me." That night, I couldn't sleep. Doubt started creeping in like slow-moving shadows. What if I lose? What if this ruins my reputation? What if I'm unemployable after this? I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling while Jade sat beside me, scrolling on her phone. "They're betting on you being too scared to finish this," she said without looking up. "I know," I whispered. She finally looked over. "But they don't know who they're dealing with." The next morning, Danielle called with an update. "We have a court date. Small Claims Division. They've been notified." It was official. We were going to court. Now the stakes were even higher. Winter and Pace ramped up their attacks. I was removed from all client projects. My login credentials were disabled 3 times in 1 week. One morning, my desk was completely cleared. Everything boxed up, no explanation. I went straight to HR. "I haven't been fired," I told Mr. Roberts. "So, unless you'd like a 3rd lawsuit added for constructive termination, I'd like my desk returned." He looked at me like I'd slapped him. "I'll check with management." "You do that." That weekend, Maria and I met Danielle in person to prepare. We walked through every detail: how many hours we worked, what we were owed, how we'd prove it. Danielle showed us how to present evidence, screenshots, documents, timelines. She trained us to stay calm in court, to speak plainly, to let facts win. I was beginning to feel like a soldier preparing for a trial by fire. Then things got worse. On Tuesday morning, someone sent a company-wide email anonymously from a Gmail account titled "The Truth About Winter and Pace." It included a copy of our wage theft complaint. Within 10 minutes, the office exploded into chaos. Phones rang. People whispered in corners. Someone screamed in the break room. Karen stormed into the operations floor and yelled, "Who leaked this?" No one spoke. She turned and walked straight into her glass-walled office, slammed the door, and stayed there the rest of the day. I didn't send that email. Neither did Maria. But whoever did, they just became the spark to a powder keg. Danielle warned us it might result in the company going into damage control. They might try to settle, or they might double down. Stay alert. By the end of the week, Maria was suddenly laid off due to budget cuts. Imani was written up for performance issues. And me? I received a cease and desist letter accusing me of slander, libel, and breach of confidentiality. Danielle laughed when she read it. "They're grasping. Let them." But I wasn't laughing. I was scared. I was angry. And I was exhausted. Still, I didn't back down. Because every time I opened my empty bank app, every time I saw my landlord's late rent warning, I reminded myself, they did this.
Not me.
And if they wanted to crush me, they should have paid me first. The morning of the hearing, I stood in front of the courthouse with my heart thudding like a drum inside my chest. It was a pale, glass building, not nearly as dramatic as the legal shows on TV, but it might as well have been a coliseum. I wasn't a warrior, but today, I had to act like one. Danielle met me outside, crisp in a navy blue suit, her legal briefcase clutched tightly in one hand. Maria stood beside me, eyes rimmed with tension but burning with quiet resolve. Inside, the courtroom was modest. A few rows of pew-like benches, a raised platform where the judge sat, and a cheap wall clock ticking like a countdown. The opposing side, Eric Pace and a company lawyer named Marla Jensen, entered looking like they were just there to swat away an inconvenience. But when Eric saw me, something flickered in his eyes. Not confidence. Caution. The judge, a middle-aged black woman with sharp eyes and a calm demeanor, read through the case file for a few moments before glancing up. "All right," she said. "Let's begin." Danielle took the lead. Calm, precise, relentless. "Your Honor, my client, Alyssa Grant, along with other employees, was subject to systematic wage theft at Winter and Pace Creative Agency. We have documented proof, payroll spreadsheets, internal communications, and testimony from multiple employees. They were denied wages for work already completed. When Ms. Grant questioned the company, she was retaliated against, removed from duties, harassed, and issued false disciplinary warnings." She handed the judge a neatly organized binder. Marla, the company's attorney, stood next. "Your Honor, these accusations are exaggerated. Delays in payroll occurred due to financial mismanagement, not malicious intent. Furthermore, Ms. Grant's access of protected documents was unauthorized and a breach of confidentiality." The judge raised an eyebrow. Unauthorized access of payroll records by someone trying to see if they'd been paid? There was a slight smirk on Danielle's face. I exhaled quietly. Then it was my turn. I stood, palms sweating, voice shaking slightly. "Your Honor, I gave everything to that company. Long hours, weekends, constant flexibility. I was told I was valuable. But when payday came, They acted like I didn't exist.
They ignored me, dodged me.
And when I asked questions, I was punished. My voice rose, confidence building. This isn't just about money. It's about being treated like a human being. Like my work matters. Like I matter. There was a stillness in the room. The judge looked through the documents again. You mentioned others were affected? Danielle nodded. We have sworn statements from 2 additional employees and a partial payroll list that shows an internal policy of delayed or withheld payments labeled non-essential contract holds. Marla jumped up. Your Honor, those internal notes were taken out of context and were part of a financial restructuring. The judge held up a hand. Thank you, Ms. Jensen. I can read. For the next 40 minutes, Danielle tore through every excuse the company offered. The judge asked pointed questions. At one point, Eric grew visibly agitated and snapped at Danielle, calling her manipulative. That didn't help their case. And then came the twist. Danielle pulled out an email chain I hadn't even seen before. It was from Karen Winter herself, forwarded anonymously. In the message, Karen instructed HR and the CFO to strategically delay payroll for entry-level contract staff to manage Q1 liquidity. She also added, they're disposable. If they leave, we can replace them. A hush fell over the courtroom. The judge read it.
Slowly. Twice.
Then she looked up. Do you have anything to say about this, Mr. Pace? Eric opened his mouth, but no words came out. I'll take that as a no. By now, my heart was thundering, but this time with adrenaline, not fear. The judge turned to me. Ms. Grant, thank you for your bravery and persistence. You and your counsel have made a compelling case. I will review all evidence and make a formal ruling within 7 business days. But I can assure you, your voice has been heard. We stood, exited the courtroom. Outside, I broke down into tears, not out of sadness, but out of sheer release. Maria hugged me tightly. Danielle just smiled and said, that's how you hold the line. 2 hours later, news spread like wildfire. Someone from the courtroom had leaked the email, again anonymously. It hit Twitter, LinkedIn, and Reddit like a bombshell. By nightfall, #BoycottWinterPace was trending. Clients started pulling out. One marketing blog published a feature titled, How a $2,000 wage dispute just cost a company $2 million in business. Eric Pace's LinkedIn account vanished. Karen Winter posted a tone-deaf response blaming disgruntled staff and cancel culture, but it only added fuel to the fire. 3 days later, Danielle called with the judge's verdict. They ruled in your favor. Full back pay, late fees, and a formal reprimand for retaliation. I was silent. You won, Alyssa. I laughed, genuinely. The kind that rises from somewhere deep, where you've kept your hope buried under fear for far too long. I called Jade. She screamed on the phone like we'd just won a lottery. But it wasn't luck. It was justice. I stood outside the courtroom, my palms sweating despite the chill in the air. It had all led to this. Weeks of gathering evidence, sleepless nights poring over state labor laws, and constant anxiety over what Josh and his team might pull in retaliation. My attorney, Lisa Martinez, a sharp, no-nonsense woman who'd taken my case pro bono after seeing my story on a local legal aid forum, stood beside me, flipping through her notes with calm precision. Inside, the courtroom felt both intimidating and oddly familiar. My years of working reception in various offices had trained me to read people, and it was clear from the moment Josh entered that he wasn't as confident as he tried to appear. His forced smirk, his eyes darting from me to the judge to the stack of papers Lisa had submitted, he was rattled. Lisa's opening statement was short and powerful. She presented my contract, text messages confirming my employment period, email follow-ups that went unanswered, and the abrupt dismissal. Most damning was a recorded voicemail Josh had left in a drunken state, saying, "Don't expect to see that money. You were a glorified temp." The courtroom went silent after that played. Josh's lawyer tried to argue that I was a contractor, not an employee. But Lisa produced tax forms, onboarding documents, and witness statements from 2 former coworkers Josh had also cheated out of payment. They had agreed to testify after I reached out on LinkedIn, their own stories eerily similar to mine. The judge, a stern woman named Honorable Marcia Jennings, asked only a few pointed questions. She then leaned forward and said something I will never forget. "Mr. Callahan, it's clear that you've exploited this employee under the false pretense of contract work. You'll pay her back wages, penalties, and court fees, or I will escalate this to a criminal labor violation." Josh's face went pale. It wasn't just a win. It was validation. I hadn't exaggerated. I hadn't imagined it. I had been wronged, and now, for the first time in this entire ordeal, I felt like someone powerful was standing in my corner. Walking out of that courtroom, I wasn't the same girl who had walked in. For weeks, I had questioned my worth, my sanity, and whether fighting back was even worth it. But in that moment, when the judge banged the gavel and declared in my favor, it was like all the pieces of me that had been slowly chipped away were coming back together. A week later, I received a certified check in the mail. Full back pay, penalties, legal fees, and something more, the handwritten note from Lisa that simply said, "You didn't just win. You set a precedent." I stared at those words for a long time. I decided to post my story online, not to bash Josh, but to help others who might be going through the same thing. I detailed the signs to look out for when an employer starts manipulating your classification, how to document everything, and where to seek free legal help. Within days, I had hundreds of messages, mostly from women, many younger than me, who'd been bullied, underpaid, or silenced. One message stood out. A girl named Tasha who worked 2 jobs and had been stiffed by both. "I thought I was just unlucky," she wrote. "Now I think maybe I'm not crazy." That hit me hard. I started volunteering with a local workers' rights organization. Not full-time. I still needed to rebuild my finances, but enough to feel like I was turning my pain into purpose. As for Josh, word got around. Several former employees followed suit, and he ended up settling with them to avoid more court battles. His reputation in the tech community tanked, and last I heard, his startup had been dropped by a major investor. I didn't smile at his downfall, but I won't lie. It felt like the universe restored balance. For the first time in months, I wasn't angry anymore. I was awake,
Alive.
empowered. I didn't just reclaim my paycheck. I reclaimed my power. It was a rainy Thursday when I saw Josh again. I had just stepped out of a workers' rights seminar downtown, umbrella in one hand, tote bag slung over my shoulder, when I noticed a familiar figure standing under the awning of a nearby cafe. He looked older, somehow less put together. His once polished demeanor had dulled, his tailored suit now rumpled and wet at the cuffs. I paused. He turned, and our eyes met. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then, to my surprise, he walked toward me. "Danielle," he said, nodding like we were old friends. "Didn't expect to see you here." "I imagine not," I replied, keeping my voice steady. There was a pause. He shifted awkwardly, clearly unsure what to say next. The man who once barked orders with unshakable arrogance now looked uncomfortable. "I heard about the advocacy work you've been doing," he finally said. "Some of my former investors brought it up." I raised an eyebrow.
Good.
"People should know how you treat your employees." Josh gave a half-hearted chuckle. "Look, I'll admit, I didn't handle things well. I made mistakes." "Mistakes?" I said sharply. "You stole from me. You exploited a loophole and hoped I'd be too afraid or too broke to fight back." He sighed, shoving his hands into his coat pockets. "The court made that clear." "You still don't get it," I said. "This was never just about money. It was about respect, dignity, and doing the right thing. And you failed every step of the way." Josh opened his mouth, but I held up a hand. "I'm not interested in apologies," I said. "Not unless they come with change." "Have you changed, Josh?" He hesitated. That silence said more than words ever could. I stepped back, umbrella raised. "Then I guess we're done here." As I walked away, I felt a strange calm. There was no satisfaction in his downfall, no thrill in seeing him squirm. But there was power in knowing that I had faced him, on my terms, and walked away whole. He no longer had a hold over me. The rain fell steadily as I crossed the street, each step feeling lighter than the last. The battle had been brutal. The scars would linger. But in that final confrontation, I realized something profound. Closure isn't about someone else admitting they were wrong. It's about you no longer needing them to. 6 months after the court ruling, life looked completely different. I had officially launched Fair Wage Voices, a nonprofit dedicated to helping low-income workers understand their rights and fight back against wage theft. The irony wasn't lost on me. What began as a personal nightmare had blossomed into a mission far bigger than myself. I spent my days hosting workshops, connecting with lawmakers, and mentoring women who reminded me of the girl I once was: wide-eyed, hopeful, and dangerously unaware of how cruel the system could be. Now, I armed them with knowledge, courage, and a support system I never had. Every so often, I'd get letters from people I had helped, handwritten notes, emails, even voice messages filled with gratitude and joy. One message in particular stayed with me. Because of you, I didn't let my boss intimidate me. I stood up. And I won. Thank you. It brought tears to my eyes. I never thought being denied a paycheck would lead me here. But maybe that was the hidden blessing in the storm. I didn't just survive injustice. I became a vessel for justice. I rented a small but beautiful office space downtown, with a glass sign on the door that read, Danielle Carter, founder, Fair Wage Voices. Every morning when I walked in, I smiled. Not because I was proud of the struggle, but because I was proud of who I became through it. I didn't just take my employer to court. I took back my power. And now I was using it to build something no one could take from me. Months passed, but the echoes of that courtroom victory never faded. One chilly fall morning, I received a thick envelope in the mail. Inside was a formal apology from the company's board. Apparently, the case had sparked a full internal audit. Dozens of employees had been compensated retroactively. Some even received promotions long overdue. It didn't erase what I'd been through, but it mattered. Later that week, I walked past the building where I once worked, where I once cried in bathroom stalls and questioned my worth. It was under renovation now. New management, new policies, new beginning. I stood there for a long time, not out of bitterness, but reflection. Some wounds don't vanish, they evolve. They become reminders, markers of strength. I turned away from the glass doors and walked into the breeze, smiling. My fight hadn't just been about money. It was about voice, value, and dignity. And somewhere along the way, I'd found all three. For every woman silenced, for every underpaid worker too afraid to speak, I was proof. Justice may not come easy, but it does come. And when it does, it changes everything.